Hey everybody, my name is Matthew Sambanis. I'm a certified public accountant in Long Island, New York, which is where my firm is located. And today I'm going to speak to you about Joe Biden's new student loan debt forgiveness plan. So let's get right into it. By the way, I read it off from my notes and then I speak about it. So if I stutter or stammer, I apologize in advance. And with that being said, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like me to share or speak about something in particular, please leave a comment. And if I'm qualified to comment on it or speak about it, I will absolutely do a video on it. So the new plan is covered under the Higher Education Act of 1965, which there's a specific subsection in there in the law that any governmental-backed student loans and grants the U.S. Education Department promises or backs up or guarantees, they have the ability to compromise, waive, or release those loans. So they haven't, meaning the current administration hasn't clarified the scope or scale of the new program. For example, the original plan covered 43 million borrowers with whom 20 million expected their loans to be forgiven entirely. What's crazy is out of the 43 million loans, about half of them are less than 20,000. So that means that 20 million people approximately have student loans for about $20,000 or less. Yes, in the grand scheme of things, that's a big number. In the grand scheme of things, it's also a very small number. And if you pay more than the minimum, which I strongly suggest, as I touched on my last video when I spoke about this, you will pay it off. These loans are made not to be paid off, and if you pay the minimum, you're never going to pay it off. So therefore, always pay more than the minimum and you'll pay it off sooner than later. So the new law or the new bill or the new whatever the case may be, they haven't clarified who's going to be covered or what type of loans they're going to be forgiven or for how much. As a side note, my opinion is not whether or not these loans should be forgiven or not. My opinion is that the cost of college is absolutely through the roof. The cost of college since 1965 has gone up through the roof, and that's when the government got involved. So the second the government gets involved in anything, costs tend to triple, quadruple, go up fivefold and sixfold, and on and on and on. So the real solution is to get the government out of the student loan business and have it go back to the private sector where real loans can be made. That'll bring down the cost of student loans. That'll bring down the cost of college, which will then in turn bring down the cost of student loans. So the real solution is getting rid of government. This is going to be dragged out, by the way. It's going to be a drawn out conversation taken on months or years. I'm sure it'll go through the election cycle. I'm sure that this will be another one of Joe Biden's running points, which, as George Bush said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, you can't fool me again. And if you get fooled again by this, if you expect your loans to be forgiven, I gotta believe it's not going to be forgiven. And that's just my opinion, whether or not it's right or wrong that the loans be forgiven. I understand that if you have student loans, you want them forgiven, but wanting versus what's right are two totally different things. I want $500 million, but again, unless I go out and work for it, nobody's going to give it to me. And having your student loans forgiven, in my opinion, is not right, and it shouldn't be shifted to the current taxpayer. Nor should people who paid off their student loans early be penalized, and nor should people who are going to graduate this year or the following year who just missed the deadline by a couple months, nor should they be penalized. So again, it goes back to the real root cause, which is why is the cost of college so high? And I'm inclined to say due to government involvement and the government guaranteeing these student loans. Going back to the original plan, I believe about 25 million people had just applied under the previous student loan for debt forgiveness. I remember one of my clients telling me that their student loans were forgiven, and I also did not believe it. I also felt like they were wrong. I didn't know enough because it was during tax season, so I didn't have my time to research it. But one of them also received a letter that said, hey, your student loans have now been forgiven. And lo and behold, after doing a little more homework on this, apparently 16 million people received this notice. So I do feel bad for you. I would absolutely be upset. And if somebody told me something and then took it away, I would be more upset. And if it was based on a vote, then I would absolutely never give them that vote again. And if you don't agree with the right side or the left side, then I wouldn't vote on at all, just based on principle. What do I think is going to happen? Same thing as last time. I feel like it's going to be dangled like a carrot in front of you in the form of a vote. The carrot is the vote, or the vote is the carrot. And if you fall for it, shame on you. Again, expecting other people to pay off your debt is not fair. I understand going to college should not be that expensive. And on the flip side, there's plenty of colleges that don't cost $20,000 a year. And there's plenty of colleges that definitely don't cost $20,000 a year to get a social science degree from, or a degree in flowers or arts or whatever it is. I'm sorry, I'm sure it's very good. I'm sure it's worth something. But if you can't generate money from it, then that is your onus and you should own it. If student loans are forgiven, or they're made to be, if they're forgiven, or whatever, remanded, compromised, whatever. If I'm the company who is co-signing the loans with the government, what does that mean? What am I going to do as the borrower, right? Or not the borrower, the lender. If my company is loaning out money to you as a student and I expect to make a rate of return on it, and the government just gets involved, what do I have to do? I have to raise my rates in the form of interest rates to people who borrow money going forward, because I now have to factor in an unknown, which is the US government, who can then turn around and say, you know what, this is forgiven, and all of a sudden that cash flow, that time value of money that I thought I had, is null and void. And there's a lot of publicly traded companies that are involved, and there's a lot of privately held companies that are involved. But at the end of the day, you have to now factor in outside, cataclysm or black swan event. You have to be compensated for that. And who's going to ultimately suffer? The people who go to college after this and take out new student loans. So that's part of the deal. And it also teaches people in the future, who cares how much student loans I take out and how much student debt I have, and who cares what the interest rates are, because ultimately somebody's going to bail me out. And so if it's a one-off, you're setting a very bad precedent and bad example. And if it's a two-off, it's going to have cataclysmic ripple effects that people haven't even begun to thought about. So again, there's too much downside to upside. And never mind the legal challenges that are definitely going to come, the lawsuits that are going to come, the wasted tax dollars and revenues, and all that other stuff to take another case up to the Supreme Court. I don't see it happening. What's the solution? So if the president were really worried about this, what would he do? He would make student loans forgivable or dischargeable in bankruptcy. Right now, they're not. So if somebody is truly hard up, if somebody is having very tough economic times, then yes, it's going to create and cater and pander to a whole new industry. But at the end of the day, the real solution would be student loans, in my opinion, or not in my opinion, I take that back. Student loans, if the president was really that worried about it, would be dischargeable in bankruptcy. Whether or not I agree with that is neither here nor there, but that would be the real solution. And that's my thinking outside of the box. I haven't came up with a bunch of other solutions or put much thought into it. That's what I would do if I were the current president and I really wanted the debt to be forgiven or wiped out or give people a real chance to start over. Again, that would then also throw in a whole other unknowns and et cetera, et cetera. But, the long story short here is, if you had student loans, which I did, pay more than the minimum. Save up a bunch of money and pay off more than the minimum whenever you can, just like I did with my house. I paid it off as fast as possible, even though the rates are great. I disagree with having any debt. I know people are proponents of it. I don't agree with it. Pay off your debt as fast as possible. save up your cash flow and reinvest it once you're done paying off your debts into good things like other assets like dividends, meaning dividend paying stocks or other assets that are out there. And don't rely on the government. Don't rely on your fellow taxpayer or your fellow citizen to assume your debt. You know, if you take something, you do it, you got the benefit of it, then you should repay it. So I'm sorry if this is hard. I'm sorry if this is steadfast. I wasn't expecting to take such a stringent tone on it. Hopefully this was somewhat of an update for you, which goes back to this is under the Higher Education Act. This is going to be long and drawn out, and ultimately, if you think your student loans are going to be forgiven, in my humble opinion, I don't think they are. For your sake, I hope they are. And while that might leave a salty taste in my mouth, ultimately, it's not going to affect me one way or another. So best of luck. Have a great rest of the day. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, share it, all that other good stuff. And if you dislike it, then please let me know. Leave a comment as to why you disliked it. If you disagree with me, let me know. And have a great rest of the day.